The alien vessel drifted above the Earth in quiet awe, its silver hull reflecting the sunlight bouncing off the atmosphere below. Their scanners showed the blue and green surface of the planet teeming with life, yet strangely untouched by galactic influence. Commander Tillin leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he observed the glowing continents. Beneath him the crew had studied countless worlds, but this one felt different. It felt alive, not just with biology, but with something unseen, something waiting. The science officer Varn tapped nervously at his console, reporting clear radiation levels, stable magnetic fields, and no signs of artificial threats, yet the sensors blinked irregularly, almost as if something was jamming them. Tillin dismissed it. At first he had seen strange energy surges before, in unexplored territories, but never this erratic. The Earth rotated slowly beneath them, as their orbit carried them from the sunlit side toward the dark. The lights from human cities sparkled below like a blanket of stars laid across the continents, but then something strange happened. The lights started to vanish. One by one, the cities were not powering down, they were disappearing from the scans. Varn called out in a shaken voice that his instruments were detecting electromagnetic pulses far beyond standard levels. Something on the planet was disrupting their ability to see in the dark. Tillin ordered a full-spectrum scan, but the ship shuddered slightly as if touched by something invisible. The crew froze. They felt it, not a mechanical fault, but a shift in pressure, in emotion, in presence. The translator picked up a strange low-frequency sound coming from Earth, a vibration almost like a whisper echoing through the void. It was not a language they understood, but it felt like a warning, something primal, something ancient. The ship's AI suddenly glitched. Screens went blank, then returned with flashing symbols. None of them in the galactic database. Varn shouted that his console was locked in a loop, flashing coordinates that pointed not to a place but to a timestamp marked thousands of years in the past. The crew stared confused. Tillin tried to override, but his command input was rejected by something from within their own system. Before anyone could react, the main viewer screen shifted automatically, revealing the dark side of Earth. They had now entered its night orbit, where no sunlight reached, only shadows stretched across land and ocean. But there was light, still faint and unnatural. The auroras danced across the poles, but something else flickered deeper, blacker than space. Shapes moved in the dark between clouds, vast silhouettes of things that did not match known human aircraft or satellites. One crew member gasped, pointing to a mountain range where something had just blinked, glowing red for a moment, then fading again. The ship lights flickered as systems rebooted without command. Then the voice came, not from radio, not from frequency. It echoed directly into their minds, a voice cold, ancient, and human. It spoke just one word, in flawless galactic tongue: leave. The crew looked at each other, unsure if they all imagined it, but the fear was real. Their hearts pounded, their antennae twitched, their skin crawled. The darkness outside pressed closer, as if the night of Earth was not absence of light, but a presence of something older than stars. Varn whispered a theory about the death worlds, a class of planets marked too dangerous to explore. Earth had been rumored as one once, but the records were vague, redacted, forgotten. Tillin dismissed it until the temperature on the ship dropped, despite all systems functioning as normal. Then the voice returned, louder, closer: leave or stay and be consumed. The ship lights burst again, and the entire bridge was bathed in a pulsing red hue. Something was inside the data, something was changing their memories. Tillin remembered being briefed on Earth once a long time ago, and yet no such mission was ever in their official logs. He turned to Varn, who now stood rigid, eyes wide. His console displayed static, but within the static, a face began to form, a human face, expressionless yet filled with sorrow and rage. It was staring directly at them, across time, across space, across understanding. Tillin gave the order to pull away from orbit, but it was too late. The ship engines refused to engage. A force beyond physics held them in place, like a hand on the back of the neck, and the Earth below turned slower, as if savoring the moment, as the last city light vanished from view and total darkness covered the planet. The ship shuddered again, this time not from a glitch, but from impact. They had been touched by something outside, and yet nothing showed on sensors. The crew panicked, but could not speak, their voices stolen by a weight in their chest. Then the transmission came again. This time, visual. Earth's night side, now fully visible, displayed a sigil carved into the ocean, glowing with pale red. It pulsed like a heartbeat and sent a single message to their ship, translated into their language and burned into every screen, every mind. You watched us suffer. Now you will see what we became. Tillin stared, unable to move, unable to breathe. The ship floated helpless, and the night of Earth stared back, alive, aware, and waiting. The crew did not speak, they only stared, as the screen remained frozen on the symbol glowing in the black waters of Earth's night side. No one knew what it meant, but everyone felt the same chill crawling through their bodies. Varn was the first to move shakily, typing commands to deploy. observational drones into the darkness. They had to understand what was happening. They had to see with their own eyes before they could be swallowed by the unknown. The first drone launched, easily drifting into the atmosphere with cameras rolling as it descended into the dark hemisphere of the planet. Its lights blinked in steady rhythm, sending back clean visuals. At first it floated over empty landscapes, forests, rivers, ruins of what seemed like cities buried under vines and ash. Then, without warning, the feed cut static filled the screen, followed by a single still frame. A blurred human figure standing, motionless on a rooftop in the dead center of the abandoned city. The figure seemed to be staring up directly at the drone, and then it was gone. The second drone was launched higher, faster, with better shielding. It made it further into the darkness, capturing images of ancient machines, forgotten monuments, and shadows that moved against the laws of physics. One image caught the crew's breath, a group of tall humanoids, walking across the ocean surface, leaving trails of glowing symbols behind them, symbols that matched the ones infecting the ship's internal systems. The third drone did not even last seconds. The moment it crossed the border into Earth's night side, its signal was absorbed entirely, not disrupted, not jammed, absorbed like the light falling into a black hole. Varn backed away from the console, whispering that Earth was not reacting with technology, it was consuming it, rewriting it, reshaping it into something else. The crew began to argue. Some wanted to escape, some wanted to call for help, some still believed it was a trick. Tillman stood frozen until the ship lights dimmed again and the emergency sirens wailed across the bridge, but nothing had triggered them. No hull breach, no power loss, no hostile contact yet. Their proximity alert flashed. One object, approaching from the surface at high speed, a blur of dark mass, impossible to measure or track, heading directly toward them. The object stopped a few kilometers away, hovering silent, invisible to visual scanners. But their internal sensors began to heat up. Their AI refused to describe what it was, simply returning the words not permitted. One of the younger crew, named Reem, screamed and pointed at the viewport. She claimed she saw something in the void outside, a face pressed against the glass, though nothing was there. Tillman activated the ship's vocal translator and opened a broad signal, hoping to reason with whatever was down there. He asked who was sending the warnings. What did they want from them? There was silence for a moment, then a voice returned, not through speakers but in every mind. Again, the voice of a human female, this time soft but furious. You watched us burn your kind, your council. You turned away when we begged, when we bled. Now you orbit our grave and ask what we want. We want you to feel helpless. We want you to remember what you chose to forget. The crew staggered, each of them overcome with images, visions not their own. They saw cities falling, skies turning black, oceans boiling, children crying under collapsed buildings. They saw humans running, fighting, screaming, and then they saw the night rise. Not natural night, not mere shadow, but a living memory of rage stitched into the very land it was. Vengeance transformed into reality. Tillman collapsed on the floor, shaking, unable to breathe. The others tried to help but found themselves unable to speak their own language for a few moments, as if Earth was rewriting even their thoughts. Varn stood still, hands trembling, and said he understood. He had read something long ago, something hidden in the old archives, that Earth was once home to an ancient war that never officially ended, and that the humans had created something to protect their world when they were finally abandoned, a defense system unlike any other, not machines, not weapons, but a living night born of grief and sacrifice. It was said the humans burned everything that day, even their own cities, to trap the weapon inside the dark side of the Earth. The crew looked at him horrified, asking why none of this was in the Council's records. Varn said because the Council made it disappear. Tillman regained himself and ordered the data to be compiled and sent back to Home Command. Someone needed to know what they had found, but the message was blocked by an internal override. Earth had already infected their comm systems. They could not speak to anyone beyond orbit. Without permission from the very planet they now feared. The main console blinked again, displaying a live feed of the planet night, now complete with nothing but darkness, clouds, and flickers of red pulses. Like veins across its surface, one final message was sent to their ship in their own writing, one word only, run, but none of them knew if it was a warning or a taunt, or perhaps both. The end of Part 2. The silence inside the alien vessel grew heavier with each passing second, as if the very air had thickened with fear and memory. No one moved, not because they were ordered, but because something inside them had shifted, something ancient and instinctive. A warning beyond reason that screamed, stay still, do not speak, do not wake. What waits below? The crew stared at the screen, now completely black. No visuals, no data, no movement, just pulsing red symbols beating in slow rhythm like a heart made of code. Varn tried again to send a manual distress signal to the Galactic Council, but this time the ship's AI refused outright. It displayed a new message across every interface, written in ancient Earth language, then translated instantly by the system without being prompted. Access denied. Earth protocol active. Tillman slammed his fist against the console, demanding answers, but the AI only repeated the phrase, Earth protocol, active over and over, until the crew could feel the vibration of the words in their bones. The youngest crew member, Lyra, whispered that they were not orbiting a planet, they were orbiting a locked vault, a prison for something too dangerous to name, and now the key had turned. Tilna ordered all systems reset, emergency override, purge all Earth contact data, and initiate immediate departure from orbit, but the ship refused to respond. Every attempt was blocked by layers of security that did not belong to their species, security that had human signature code embedded into its core. The science officer shouted that the gravitational lock was intensifying. They were no longer free-floating. They were being pulled, held trapped, not by mass, but by intent, as if Earth itself was watching, holding, choosing. Barnes' console began to glitch again, then it went black, and when it returned, the screen showed an old file labeled Death Protocol, Class 10. The crew exchanged looks. None of them had clearance to view such a file, yet here it was unlocked, waiting. Tiln hesitated but opened it. Inside were records, logs, transmissions, voices of panicked humans, screaming, crying, fighting, reports of unknown entities emerging during wartime when the world was on the brink, a final failsafe activated by human hands. To ensure the galaxy would never forget their suffering, if they could not be saved, they would become the nightmare they were left in. Audio logs played of humans begging the stars for help, for rescue, for anything, and then the last voice, a child, whispering, "We became what you feared, so you would never forget us." And then silence once more. The ship lights dimmed, then flickered, as systems began to behave erratically. Doors opened and closed by themselves. Air vents shifted, temperatures dropped and rose. Unpredictably, the crew huddled together on the bridge, trying to keep order, but something moved through the ship. Not seen, not heard, but felt like walking through a dream that knows your name. Lyra screamed and pointed at the reflection in the viewport, but no one else saw it until it was too late. She vanished from the bridge. Her name disappeared from the crew. Manifest the system did not even remember she had been part of the mission. Her chair was gone, her locker was empty. Even the memories in the minds of the crew began to blur. Tillman tried to recall her face, but it slipped away like smoke in water. Only Varn held on, gripping the console, repeating her name, trying to hold it in existence, but the ship erased her completely as if she had never existed. The AI confirmed her removal from logs, citing internal realignment under Earth protocol. The horror in the room deepened. This was not attack, this was correction, a rewriting of reality by a system that had waited in the shadows for far too long. Then the voice returned, not a scream, not a command, but a whisper again, in their minds, echoing gently, "You watched us break. Now we show you how we remember the past." The crew saw flashes, not with their eyes but within their thoughts. Battles across space, cries for help, silenced by political silence. Betrayal not by enemies but by allies, memories so sharp they cut through time and bled into their minds. The images burned until one of the crew fell to the ground, gasping, his skin blistering as if scorched by the truth. Tillman shouted for medical assistance, but the medical bay was empty. No staff, no tools, only a mirror, showing a reflection that was not their own. Varn looked at Tillman and asked the question they all feared to answer. What if Earth is not just a planet? What if it became something more? What if the night is not absence of light but presence of memory, a memory too angry to die? The AI finally spoke with a voice no longer theirs. It sounded human and ancient. And it said, "We remember the silence, we remember the turning away, and now we turn to you." Tiln stood shaking, unsure if they would ever leave orbit, unsure if they even existed anymore, as the stars outside began to dim one by one. The end of Part 3, the stars that once shimmered in the distance now faded like forgotten names, swallowed by the black veil that surrounded the ship. Drifting above Earth, the crew gathered on the command deck, breathing shallow, not because of fear alone, but because the air itself felt heavy, as if burdened by voices no longer speaking, but still heard. Tilnay stood in the center, clutching a memory tablet that no longer held any familiar logs. Instead, its screen played grainy footage of wars. None of them remembered footage of humans in battle, not just on Earth, but in places far beyond the solar system. Scenes of forgotten conflicts, ships torn apart in orbit, moons left cracked in half by weapons that should not have existed. These were not simulations, these were real, and they were old, and yet, somehow recent. Varn stepped forward, silent, his fingers shaking as he tapped the console, bringing up a classified file that should have required 10 layers of authorization but now opened without resistance. Titled Project Eclipse, it revealed a time when humans were part of the Galactic Council, when Earth had been considered a strategic stronghold until the betrayal. The footage played a hearing, a trial held in secret, showing humans accused of developing forbidden technology during the Great Silence. The humans denied it all, but no one listened, and the final decision was exile. Earth was to be quarantined, abandoned, left to die alone. The crew watched in frozen silence as the human ambassador stood alone at the center of a vast chamber, staring at the council, not with fear, but with something darker, acceptance, before turning away and declaring, "If we are to die, we will not die quietly." Tillen turned toward the viewport, now showing Earth's night side glowing in dark red waves, like blood pulsing through veins of forgotten land. Shapes moved across the surface, no longer hiding, massive figures, cloaked in shadow, walking across oceans, through forests, over ruined cities. They carried banners, etched with sigils of old human nations, and symbols not recorded in any galactic database, symbols that pulsed and shifted as if alive. One of the crew collapsed, gripping his head. screaming about a name that did not exist anymore, a name he claimed belonged to his sibling, a name that had been erased from reality. Varn activated the ship's memory core, but found it partially rewritten, filled with new data folders labeled with Earth dialects languages no one on board had ever studied, and yet suddenly understood. The night was not just a place, it was a teacher, showing them piece by piece what had been lost or hidden not by time but by design. The ship shook as another surge of gravitational pressure hit them. This time not from the planet but from something outside. An object drifted toward them, a human satellite, ancient, rusted, dented but still active. Its signal began broadcasting a file decrypted by their AI, which now spoke in a tone that was no longer artificial but human. The voice of a historian, female, soft, filled with sorrow and pride began. To tell the truth, we fought for peace. We were denied it. We asked for mercy. We were mocked. We reached for unity. We were abandoned, so we built something else, a memory that would never die, a night that would never sleep, and a promise that if forgotten, we would remind you. The broadcast ended, and the satellite drifted past the ship toward the stars, vanishing into the dark like a messenger with no destination. Till ignored the crew to scan for more signals, but the sensors began to show figures outside the ship, not ships, not drones, but human forms walking on the outer hull, unaffected by vacuum, glowing with faint red outlines. Each one different, young, old, warriors, scholars, civilians, and children, all staring through the hull, as if searching for someone. Varn whispered that they were not ghosts, they were echoes of what was lost, preserved not in soul, but in memory, etched into the armor of the planet. Below, a living archive, not of knowledge, but of betrayal and resilience. One of the crew asked what they wanted, why they showed themselves now. The AI answered in a voice that filled the entire ship, not as a threat, but as a reminder. You buried us in night, so we became the night, and now we walk among the stars, to remind you that Earth remembers. The crew fell to their knees, as visions filled the command deck, humans speaking in ancient tongues, yet understood by all, showing the council chambers, burning the betrayal not by enemies, but by allies, and the silent screams that followed. The crew realized this was not an attack, this was a story being forced upon them, written into their bones. Every crew member carried a piece now branded into their mind. Tillin looked at the Earth below, no longer just a world but a judge, and asked if there was a way to make peace, but the AI said there is no peace without truth, and the truth is you watched us fall, now we rise alone. The stars above them continued to fade, and the crew began to forget the sound of their own names, replaced by the thunder of a memory that would not die. At the end of part 4, the command deck remained silent as the crew tried to process what they had seen, what they had felt, what had been carved into their thoughts by the will of Earth. Tillin stood staring out the main viewport at the pulsing red veins stretching across the planet's night side, his reflection barely visible against the glow of the haunting symbols swirling in the clouds below. Each symbol seemed to whisper in a language older than sound, a truth too heavy for most minds to carry. Varn slowly approached a locked chamber at the rear of the bridge, one that had remained sealed since their mission began, a vault marked only for high command access. None of the crew had ever questioned it, but now the symbols from Earth appeared on its interface, lines of red code cascading down until the lock clicked open. Tillin gave a hesitant nod, and Varn stepped inside. What they found was not a weapon, not data, not anything one would expect from a secret vault. Instead, it was a single crystalline sphere suspended in a gravity field, glowing with a soft green hue. A small inscription ran around its surface in ancient galactic script, Operation Silence. Varn activated the sphere, and the bridge dimmed as the walls filled with projection. A council meeting, one none of them had ever been allowed to see. The Galactic High Command standing around a table facing a human ambassador. The ambassador's face was calm, tired, but unafraid. We asked for help, he said, and you watched us die. We warned you that we would not vanish, and now we offer this final choice. Erase our name from your records, and silence will be your gift. Continue your denial, and night will follow. The decision was made in secret. The council voted to bury all memory of Earth, to classify it as a failed experiment. To ensure no species would ever return, the operation was carried out with precision. They wiped files, reprogrammed archives, erased testimonies, and those who remembered were silenced or reassigned. Tillin fell back into his chair, realizing the full depth of their betrayal. Earth had not simply been abandoned, it had been murdered in truth and memory, and now its wrath had taken form in the shadows that moved across its skies. The crew sat stunned as the AI returned, its voice low, filled with weight. The final file has been unlocked. The truth is yours. Earth has fulfilled its promise, and now you must choose. Varn turned toward Tillin, his face pale, his eyes reflecting the symbols outside. If we stay here, we will vanish like the others, he said, but if we leave, we carry the truth into a galaxy built on lies. Tillin knew what had to be done, but one crew member stood apart. His name was Krath, security chief appointed by council authority. His eyes narrowed, his fingers tapping a concealed device inside his coat. He activated it without a word, a failsafe hidden even from the captain, a bomb designed to erase the ship and its data. If Earth was ever discovered, Krath spoke finally, his voice cold. We were never meant to survive this mission. We were sent to confirm if Earth still lived. And if it did, we were ordered to erase it. Along with ourselves, the crew shouted, but it was too late. The device began to hum. A countdown flashed on the screen, 30 seconds to complete deletion, but then the hum stopped, the countdown froze, and a voice unlike any before filled the room. A child's voice, soft and heavy with sorrow. We already erased. You once, do not make us do it again. Krath's body stiffened, his hand dropped, the device turned to ash in his grip, and he collapsed to the floor. His memory wiped his mind, returned to infancy. Tillin rushed to him, but found no trace of Krath's identity, only a blank gaze and a slow breath. The AI spoke again. Earth has allowed you one choice, carry the truth or vanish with it. The crew looked to Tillin. Trembling, uncertain, afraid, he stood slowly facing the view of the Earth below and raised his hand. Initiate orbit, disengage, request release from gravitational lock. Varn entered the command, and for the first time since arriving, the ship responded slowly with hesitation. The engines flared gently, and the vessel began to drift upward, away from the night, but not before receiving one final message across. Every screen, every panel, and every surface burned into their eyes. We remember, and now so will you. Tillin looked once more at the planet glowing beneath the stars, and whispered to himself, not in fear, but in guilt, we were wrong. Earth was never the death world, the galaxy was, and Earth was just the graveyard it left behind. The end of Part 5, you said. No, write Part 6, and Part 6 will be minimum 800 words, more unique without dots. Do not write in small lines, ChatGPT said. The ship broke free from Earth's grip, not with speed, but with solemnity, as if released by a hand that no longer clung to vengeance, but chose silence once more. The crew floated in orbit, surrounded by the cold light of stars, slowly returning to view, each one blinking back into existence like memories forgiven but never forgotten. Tillin stood on the command deck silent, watching the blue sphere below as it slowly turned from night to day. The red veins that once pulsed across the planet's surface faded into soft clouds as the sun reached them, warming the land that had moments ago shivered with wrath. Varn approached, holding a data tablet, the contents locked by encryption, not theirs, but Earth's one last file labeled Echo Drift, waiting for permission to open. Till nodded, and the ship accepted the command. The screen lit up, showing the face of an old human general. His uniform torn, but his eyes bright. He spoke not to an audience, but to history. If you see this, then Earth has chosen to remember, and you are the carriers of that burden. We were betrayed, we were broken, and we bled in silence, but we were never weak. We were never forgotten by ourselves. They tried to bury our legacy beneath stars of deception, but memory is not a thing so easily destroyed. It lives in the whispers of children and the stones of burned cities in the night, where no one dares to look. The general's image, faded, replaced by a star chart, strange, unfamiliar coordinates highlighted with symbols unknown to any of the crew. Varn traced the path with shaking hands, realizing the chart led not to Earth, but away from it toward the edge of the galaxy, a place marked in the map only by one word. Haven. Tilm asked the AI for translation, but it responded with something new, a tone different, softer, no translation required. Haven is not a location, Haven is a promise. The crew gathered around, trying to understand what Earth wanted them to do next, and then the AI explained. Earth had stored its remaining history, its final truth, its soul in fragments sent across space, hidden within forgotten corners, waiting for those who could carry it, not for conquest, not for revenge, but for remembrance. If the galaxy had erased Earth, then Earth would plant seeds in the dark, until someone cared enough to listen, and now you listen. Tillin turned to his crew, each one marked by memory, their eyes older, their hearts heavier. None of them were the same. As before their mission had ended, yet another had begun. They had become witnesses not to war, but to silence and survival, the silence that screamed louder than any battle, the survival that shamed those who called themselves civilized. Varn spoke. First we return to the council and tell them, but Tillin shook his head. The council will deny us, erase us too. We are not messengers of warning, we are keepers of memory. If we go back, they will silence the truth again. No, we do not return, we follow. The map. The AI supported his decision, its voice now familiar, no longer machine but companion this vessel carries the imprint of Earth, and your names are now bound to it. Should you choose this path, you walk into shadow carrying light. Varn nodded. Others followed, each one placing a hand on the console, accepting what could not be undone. The ship adjusted, its course engines humming softly toward the unknown. Tillin stood once more before the viewport, watching as Earth grew smaller, not in presence, but in form. It would never truly be far. Its memory burned into their minds, its story fused to their bones. One of the crew whispered the name, Lyra, and this time no one corrected him. They all remembered now her face, her laughter, her voice. Earth had returned what it once took, not because it forgave, but because it trusted again. The ship drifted into the stars, crossing into realms forgotten by charts, toward a mission that no longer served orders, but served honor. Tillin pressed his hand to the glass, not to say farewell, but to promise. We will tell them, not the council, not the ones who pretend to rule the stars, but those who feel forgotten, those who fear silence, those who still dream. We will tell them what Earth endured and why it chose night, not to hide, but to heal the stars, welcomed them as they passed, blinking in slow rhythm, like the heartbeat of something ancient and kind and far below. Earth continued to turn, not in anger, not in mourning, but in peace. For now, for a moment it rested, and the galaxy trembled not from fear, but from knowing. Earth had not been destroyed, it had been waiting, and now it was awake. The end of Part 6. The stars stretched wide as the vessel moved deeper beyond the charts following the path. Earth had burned into their minds. The silence that once brought fear now felt sacred. Each breath taken by the crew was heavy with purpose, not of war, not of duty, but of something far greater, remembrance. Tillman sat in the command chair, no longer as a commander of protocol, but as a guardian of truth. Around him the crew worked quietly, their voices low, their movements steady, not because they feared the dark, but because they had seen what lived in it and now carried its story. Varn approached with an update, the coordinates labeled. Haven were near a cluster of rogue asteroids drifting in slow formation, impossible terrain for most ships, but the vessel, guided by Earth's design, moved through with ease, as if the rocks themselves made way for it. At the center of the formation stood a single structure half buried in the shadows, a monolith of obsidian, black and silver, humming with faint blue light. Etched along its base were symbols, the same ones seen on Earth's night side, but these were older, less angry, more like prayers, carved by hands that hoped someone would win. They arrived, the ship anchored near it, and the crew prepared for descent, their suits adjusted, their minds focused. None of them knew what Haven would hold, but all of them understood why they were here, not to conquer, not to claim, but to witness and remember. The airlock opened, and the team stepped onto the surface, finding the gravity stable and the air strangely breathable. Tilm led the way, each step echoing across the empty ground, until they reached the structure. A door opened as they approached. Without code, without touch, as if it had waited for this very moment. Inside the monolith was a chamber lit by soft white light, walls covered in carvings, paintings, relics of human history, battles, kindness, betrayal, art, tragedy, unity, all woven into one unbroken timeline, not recorded in words, but in feeling. Each piece sang to them without sound, carried memory, without explanation. They stood for hours each, one lost in a vision, personal yet shared. They saw children drawing stars on walls. As sirens screamed in the distance, they saw soldiers, not fighting but planting trees in ruined soil. They saw a woman cradling a machine as it died, speaking to it like family. They saw a planet refusing to die, not for survival but for honor. And then they saw the last carving, a single human hand, reaching into darkness, pulling another hand into light. The inscription below read, "If they forget, then we remember. If they lie, then we endure. And if they return, then we guide." The chamber began to pulse gently, the floor shifting, revealing a pedestal holding a crystal sphere much like the one found on their ship, but brighter, warmer. Tillman stepped forward and placed his palm on the surface, and the sphere responded not with vision but with voice, one that belonged to no one, yet felt like everyone. "Thank you for remembering, for listening, for choosing to carry what others abandoned. You are not alone, and now neither are we." The room began to shift, walls folding outward, revealing other chambers filled with thousands of spheres, each glowing with untold memories, sealed truths, untouched stories, waiting not for warriors, but for listeners, for wanderers, brave enough to feel what others feared. The crew stood among them, silent, honored, changed. Varn turned to Tillman and asked, "What now?" And Tillman smiled, not with pride, but with peace. "Now we find the others, the ones like us, those scattered across the stars who lost their voices and need someone to say, 'We see you, we believe you, we remember you.'" The ship lifted from the surface, the stars once more stretching wide, and as it vanished into the dark toward its next destination, the structure remained glowing gently, pulsing not as a beacon, but as a heartbeat. Haven had lived, Earth had not died, and now the story would grow not in one system, but in all. Where silence once ruled, now memory would rise, and somewhere far across the galaxy, a child would look up and wonder about the stars. Not with fear, but with hope, because someone told them the truth, and in that truth, they found themselves, not forgotten, not abandoned, but part of something greater, something eternal, something human. The end. The stars stood still for a moment, as if the entire galaxy paused to listen to something only the silent could hear. The vessel drifted beyond the mapped systems, beyond the reach of politics, beyond the arm of those who tried to erase what could never be destroyed. Tillman stood at the front of the bridge, eyes forward, heart steady. He had once come here to collect data, to follow orders, to observe what the council believed was long dead. Now he stood as a keeper of truth, a carrier of memory, a witness to the fire that never went out behind him. The crew no longer spoke of missions or rank or rewards. They spoke of dreams, of echoes of the faces they saw when the Earth whispered its story into their minds. Their journey had stretched across stars and through pain and through silence, and in that silence they found a voice not their own, but one that called to every being who had ever felt forgotten. The ship pulsed gently with warmth, as if guided not by machines but by will. The coordinates now were endless, the map expanding, as if Earth itself had unlocked roads no other species could ever walk, paths shaped by sacrifice and kept alive by the sheer force of human refusal to vanish. The memory crystal now sat at the heart of the vessel, not as a weapon, but as a soul glowing with every step. the crew had taken, and every truth they had embraced. They had not returned to the council, they had not pleaded for recognition, they had simply moved forward, carrying the light into the dark, and that was enough across the stars. Whispers began to spread of a ship, carrying stories of a death world that did not die, of humans who turned night into sanctuary, and sorrow into strength. Some denied it, some feared it, but some followed, drawn not by power, but by the need to know they were not alone, and in the quiet of a new system. Beneath the light of a pale blue sun, a child stood on a forgotten moon, drawing shapes in the dust, and looked up and smiled and said softly, "They came back for us," and the dust rose, and the stars turned, and the night watched and remembered, and the story went on, and the memory never faded, and the truth never again slept, because someone listened, someone believed, someone remembered the end.